Welcome to our anti-doping podcast brought to you by UIPM, which is the International Federation of Modern Pentathlon Olympic Sport. Our mission with this podcast is to raise awareness about clean sport and provide pentathletes, their coaches, fans with the latest insight on anti-doping. I'm Thomas and I have a PhD in biochemistry. Alongside me is my colleague Christian, who holds a PhD in pharmacy. We are both anti-doping experts dedicated to promoting clean sport. In this podcast series, we'll focus on prohibited substances and the rational use of dietary supplements, offering valuable information to help you navigate these complex topics. Hello everyone and welcome back to our podcast on sports and health. Today we are tackling a topic that's been generating a lot of debate, cannabinoids, specifically THC and CBD. We are going to explore why these substances are so widely discussed in sports, where the boundaries between performance, recovery and regulations can sometimes get a bit blurry.
Exactly, Tomasz. Cannabinoids like THC and CBD are frequently marketed for recovery, stress relief and even potential performance enhancement. However, for pentathletes, these compounds can come with unique rules and risks. We are here to clarify what's allowed, what's banned, and the science about it.
And we also answer some critical questions today, like why is THC prohibited for athletes during competition? Can athletes use CBD without risking a positive doping test? And what about the passive smokes exposure or edibles, which are quite popular nowadays, so could those affect an athlete's career?
There's a lot to unpack, so let's dive in and separate fact from fiction.
We are quite lucky with this topic because we have so many cases, so many stories to tell, and it's always great to have stories like that. So let's start with our first story of Michael Phelps. I think that everybody has heard this name of the famous swimmer. Michael Phelps was the part of the story because in 2009 a photo of him was published showing him using marijuana at a party. Although he wasn't competing at the time, he received a 3-month suspension which caused a major scandal and led to losing some significant sponsorship.
I have a question. Since it was in 2009, who made the decision? Was it USADA or IOC or his national federation?
Yeah, the rules at that time were a bit different, and from this perspective, it was actually USA Swimming Disciplinary Committee, which is quite surprising. They view it as a violation of their code of conduct, emphasizing that Phelps, as a public figure and role model, has specific responsibilities.
This case really highlights a key aspect. Athletes are bound by codes of conduct that often govern behavior both on and off the field. However, many athletes may not fully understand these expectations.
I think from this case, we can give advice to our pentathletes listeners that you need to be very careful what you sign. And if you sign something, you should definitely read it very carefully because then you fully understand what have you signed.
So go ahead and try to find your code of conduct and read it.
Right, that's right. I think that this also raised the question of regional legal and regulatory differences. While THC might be legal in some places, it remains a banned substance under WADA guidelines, creating potential confusion.
Absolutely, Tomasz. Athletes need to be really vigilant, and what's legal in their region doesn't always align with anti-doping regulations.
Now, we can move to another case, and Christian, you can introduce the second one.
So, this case involves judoka Nicolas Del Popolo. He was disqualified from 2012 Olympics after testing positive for THC metabolites, especially that was the carboxy THC. And this was attributed to accidentally consuming marijuana-laced cookies.
Was this explanation plausible?
Potentially. THC levels in edibles can be very inconsistent and it can lead to unintentional positives. So this inconsistency makes any edibles, cookies, brownies, anything really, particularly risky as pentathletes might assume they contain only trace amounts. So yeah, our pentathletes, if you have a product in your hand and on the label it states THC, stay away from it really.
And speaking about edibles, cross-contamination is a major issue as well. Even CBD products marketed as a THC-free may contain small amounts of THC if they are not rigorously tested, potentially resulting in a positive test.
Right, Tomasz. Athletes should only use products from trusted brands that provide transparent and third-party testing.
Now let's move to more current case of Sha'Carri Richardson, very famous US athlete. She missed the Tokyo Olympics after testing positive for THC, which she said she used to cope with a family tragedy. This 1-month suspension essentially cost her a chance at the Olympics.
This case also brings up an essential reason why THC is actually banned in sport. THC impairs reaction time, coordination and decision making, which poses a safety risk. It's banned to ensure fair play and actually to keep athletes safe.
I think that thanks to these 3 cases we have highlighted why athletes need to be very careful, especially with these exact substances. And now maybe we can move a little bit forward to discuss the broader effects of cannabinoids on athletic performance and safety.
The combination of impaired motor skills and delayed responses might be really concerning in high-intensity sports where split-second decisions are crucial.
So what are actually effects of cannabinoids on the brain and their risks?
Cannabinoids bind to CBD receptors, CB receptors, those are cannabinoid receptors in brain. They can affect various areas of the brain. They can affect motor functions, reaction time, memory, and they reduce nerve signal transmission, and that really raises the risks of injuries.
So from this perspective, I would just say that cannabinoids don't necessarily enhance performance. So why would athletes be drawn to them?
I would say that primarily for relaxation or to alleviate pre-competition anxiety maybe. Some athletes also seek cannabinoids for pain relief. However, the potential risks, like we have said, the delayed reaction times, impaired judgment, especially in high-risk sports, for example, combat sports, or in our case, fencing. Typically, those negative effects outweigh any benefits in competitive settings.
I think it's also very important, especially with cannabinoids, to consider the lack of conclusive evidence. While we have some anecdotal benefits of these substances, and they are often highlighted, scientific studies, especially on their long-term effects on athletes' performance, are still limited.
That's actually a good point, Tomasz. Athletes should be cautious, as the actual benefits may not be as significant as they may seem, and the legal and health risks could really overshadow those perceived benefits.
Now let's discuss CBD, which is another compound derived from cannabis sativa. But unlike THC, it doesn't have psychoactive effects and is often marketed for improved mood, sleep, and recovery. I think that in the last 3 or 4 years, the market has been actually flooded with supplements containing CBD. It's also in face cream, in shampoos, in different oils drop. So it's for vaping, so you can find the totally different brands of the CBD. So CBD is permitted, THC is not. So why is the difference?
Well, CBD interacts with the same receptors like THC, so they have that in common. But CBD has a more calming effect without psychoactive effects. However, contamination risks for our athletes are real. CBD products can contain other cannabinoids because those are the extracts. For example, if you have an oil extract from the CBD, what is it extracted from? From the cannabis. And cannabis contains a lot of cannabinoids those are more than 140 cannabinoids, and it is really hard to separate CBD from other ones. So still in these products can be small trace amounts of other cannabinoids.
So as CBD is permitted, we don't have to discuss if it's good or bad to use CBD products, but for our pentathletes, they really need to be careful, especially because of contamination, cross-manufacturing issues, and they are quite critical. Athletes should verify products through third-party testing and avoid unintentional exposure to THC from this perspective.
Yep, that's correct.
As we were discussing the mechanism of action of THC, CBD is something quite similar, but you can't get high from taking CBD. Are there some studies which can prove some reasoning for taking CBD?
Current studies are mostly lab-based, with limited research specifically on athletes. We don't have any data on athletes. Until more is known, it's wise for athletes to be cautious and avoid assuming all claims are backed by science.
I hope I'm correct, but I believe that in Europe, CBD is not approved for oral intake, but only for skin use.
Well, the regulatory status in Europe is that CBD is seen as a novel food. It cannot be used in food until it has authorization from the European Commission. And the case is that it was not granted any marketing authorization, because for that you would have to prove that CBD is safe for use.
I've heard that in US there are combination of THC and CBD medication to be used to treat some serious health condition. What are those conditions, and is it like promising substance in this field?
Well, actually in Europe there's one medicine as well. It is called Epidiolex, and it is used to treat rare epileptic conditions. Those are, if I remember correctly, Dravet syndrome, tuberous sclerosis complex, and Gaustadt-Lennox syndrome or something like that. So these are the instances where the electrical activity of the brain isn't correct. It is flaring up, and you have to reduce the electrical activity of the brain. And CBD might help in that. It might help these patients to have less seizures, but that's the only condition where it was studied actually. And yeah, it can be used orally. Before we have said that it is prohibited for oral use, but that involves dietary supplements. So it can be used in one medicine, but it cannot be used in dietary supplements.
Regarding elite athletes like pentathletes, CBD is usually used for recovery. Does it really help athletes?
Well, manufacturers certainly market it that way, but control studies are limited. The supposed benefits for recovery and pain relief are mostly anecdotal, but they are not scientifically backed.
And I think in our anti-doping podcast, we will repeat this claim a lot of times, that without sufficient evidence, athletes should be very careful about expecting too much from CBD and other substances as well, particularly given the contamination risk.
Exactly. Relying on these claims without solid research could lead athletes into using either ineffective or even risky products.
And elite athletes also need to be very careful because of doping control.
Yep, that's right.
Because the contamination remains as a high risk, and you actually never know what's inside those products.
Yep. While CBD was removed from the banned list in 2018, contamination remains a high risk. Broad-spectrum CBD oils that we have discussed might contain undeclared THC or other cannabinoids, potentially leading to a positive test.
So, well, under strict liability, athletes are still responsible for anything they consume, and this makes cross-contamination a serious concern. As well, small amounts of THC can lead to doping violation.
Right, Tomasz. Athletes need to stay really vigilant with supplements, and the consequences of a positive test, even if it was unintentional, can be severe.
Christian, to wrap up, what are 3 essential things athletes should remember about cannabinoids and CBD?
The first one, the effects of cannabinoids, including CBD, come with risks that often outweigh the benefits in a sport context. The second one might be that CBD itself isn't banned, but contamination risks remain high. Athletes should carefully select products from verified sources to reduce these risks. The third one, let me think. Well, ultimately, athletes bear full responsibility for all substances they consume. So they should prioritize caution, especially with supplements that could impact their career.
Well, thank you for that summary, Christian, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And that's it for today's episode of Cannabinoids in Sports, THC and CBD. Stay tuned for more insight next time.
Next time.